Hey guys, what's up? I'm Sean. So all of us are like college students right now, and I know when we were younger we all had to wear school uniforms, and it probably wasn't what we all enjoyed, but I'm here to talk about if kids or students should be wearing school uniforms in school. So school uniforms positively impact students, and there's three different ways why it impacts students. So point number one, it's the social aspect can impact a student's life and also the personal safety of the student. And the second point is the academic level, and then like the way student uniforms fits them with like their education. And then the last point is the financial aspect, so for families and students. So following with my first point, it could prevent bullying, crimes, and gang-related activities. So an individual named Jay Wheeler, he's a Florida school board member. He stated that schools had 46% drops in gang-related activities after implementing a one-year policy for their first uniform policy. And then he also quoted that, imagine a U.S. Army recruiter recruiting citizens for the U.S. Army, and then not wearing a uniform. So the success rate is obviously going to go down. So implement that with a gang recruiter, and then it has the same effect. It improves unity within the school, and then it also builds school pride, belongingness, identity. And a woman named Linda Fossing made a study of about 1,000 Texas students where they felt more positive with the school community, and they just felt like they belonged within the school compared to not being involved while wearing it. And then it also creates self-discipline and safety for a student. So it helps, when you see someone in a school uniform, it helps them identify who they are, where they're from, by their logo, the colors of it, and then they all go in groups together or individually, so you know they're a student. And then by self-discipline, they learn to have time management skills where us as college students are learning as we grow, but it teaches them at a younger age, so it helps them a lot with life. And then they also want to with school uniform, it helps them surround people they want to be surrounded with. So they're obviously not going to be around bullies or gangs or negative things that can affect them within their life, so it can help them improve. And then they create their own set of rules, which means that they'll learn how to do things on their own while also getting help from teachers or parents, but they learn it by themselves. On to my second point about the academics of that correlate with school uniform. It improves attendance and the participation of a student. So when they wear the uniform, they're part of the school, they represent it, they're committed to it. So every day they go to the school, they'll be wearing it, and then I think it gives them a better vibe and a better atmosphere and a learning environment. And then another thing is that graduation rates affect school uniforms, or with school uniforms. So Draw, who did a study in Ohio, reported that 11% of graduation rates went up with schools that required school uniforms. And then 4.6% of graduation rates dropped when schools had non-uniform policies. So by seeing the comparison with those two, that obviously school uniforms had an impact on just graduating itself. And then one last thing on this point is that it helps better focus for the student and there's less distractions. So in a classroom like this, we all judge each other based on how we look or on our outfits, but with the school uniform, everything's even playing level field, so there's not much to judge since we're all equally the same as far as a fashion wise. And then Stover, who quoted, implementing school uniform policy creates status symbols that are less important, and then pure competition would be reduced, and then emphasis in school would be its main goals, which at the end of the day is what school officials are trying to build, is to learn better and to learn more. And my last point on the financial side of it is that it saves money and it's reused. You can reuse it or recycle it. So, in a survey from the NAESP, did 77% of respondents estimated that the average cost of uniform costs $150 per child per year. And we were in school about 9 months, so that's equivalent to about $17 a month for 9 months, which, if you think about it, isn't too bad for school uniforms per child. And then another point is that you can also donate it whenever you're done, so you don't have to you give it to a better cause, you bring it down, or you can also give it to your siblings or your cousins that need it, so they don't have to spend as much money because they're gonna grow into it and you're outgrowing it. And then those are my points on how school uniforms impact the student's life. I mean, we could all talk about how we hate it and how it's really bad, but at the end of the day, I think you don't really lose much from it. You have nothing to lose, and then it's just better overall for a student and as a person when you grow. So yeah, thanks guys.
Well, Sean, the best things about the speech, I think you've got a clear proposition. The supporting structure is nicely labeled as you go through it. I have a little bit of a drawback with it at the beginning because the supporting points are not really declarative sentences, and you want to make sure that they are claims. But ultimately, we know what the inference is, at least on the first two. The third one was a little bit confusing because, the financial issue, I thought that in the long run you were going to be talking about how school uniforms are going to be financially beneficial to the families, and it sounds more like you've got a rebuttal argument built in here that it's not that big a deal to have to pay for school uniforms. So instead of it being an argument that advances school uniforms, it's kind of an attempt to answer an argument that hasn't been made yet, and I'm not sure that that was necessary. It seems like you still needed to build a stronger case for the school uniforms. Like I said, I thought you cited the supporting points pretty clearly. The proof on it, I think, is a little bit problematic. You had one good quote that you started with that talked about how there was a 46% decrease in gang activity when they implemented a uniform policy. That's at least one particular school. I think you need to have a little bit more information to generalize from that, but that's a good piece of information to start with. After that, we didn't really get much information on that. There's kind of this hypothetical about, I guess, if you're wearing a school uniform, you don't make a very good gang recruiter because you've got this analogy that you're drawing to recruiting for the military. I'm not exactly sure that that's where people do most of their recruiting for the gangs anyway, so I think that's perhaps a little bit problematic. It's hypothetical at best. There was a study that you referred to about how students felt more part of the school. That's, a general piece of information. It's not bad, but it doesn't really seem particularly convincing. Then we get a lot of hypotheticals on the second part. The best evidence that you had on the second part were the graduation rates, but the statistics that you present need to be explained a little bit more. That 11% and that 4.6%, those sound like good numbers. I assume that means that schools that had a uniform policy had 11% higher graduation rates, and that schools that failed to have school uniforms, I don't know what the 4.6 represents. Is that they declined when they got rid of a school uniform policy? It's hard to tell how those statistics are being used and where they came from. I'm sure that there's an explanation in the source that you consulted, but it's not clear in the speech right here, and I think that's a little bit problematic. And then we get some hypotheticals about being judged in the clothes that we wear. That's an okay idea here. I'm not sure how important that is. This bullying thing that you started with, I thought that was going to be an issue, and it turns out to be a non-issue in most of the presentation. Like I said, on the third point, you've got some factual data about what it costs to have the school uniforms, but how that shows that this is that it has a positive impact on people, I'm not sure. I don't think that that third point is relevant to the main proposition. Like I said, it sounds mostly like it's a anticipation, it's a inoculation argument trying to defend against an argument that might be coming from the other side. And I'm not even sure the other side would even make that argument. All right, thank you.